Welcome to this week's Rob's Country. We're going to be having a look at a bit of an update as far as irrigation season is concerned. And I know we're underwater, but I just wanted to look at that as well. And also, we're going to be meeting a lady who decided that she was going to do something from home and is doing exceedingly well. But in the meantime, Jim, serious situation. What are you, horticulturalist, contaminating the whole of Christchurch City?
Yes, well, the people in the northern part of the city, towards Marston's, up in Redwood and beyond the Styx Mill Bridge, have received a letter of recent days from ECAN saying that potentially your property could be contaminated and you should attend some regional meetings and listen to what they've got to say. And if the concern is still there, maybe you should get it tested at about $1,500 a time. Being a horticulturalist and having serviced a number of growers in that area for many years before the houses were there, I can assure you that, I've actually spoken to ECAN about this, I can assure you that the chances of any contamination there are about -10, and I believe with what Christchurch is going through and has gone through, they don't need to have an alarmist type situation like this going out to people who don't understand and will be quite concerned about the literature that came out. I identified my 2 properties I've got in that region, and they've assured me that they can't possibly have any contamination. I said, you're absolutely right. I know exactly where the orchards and the vegetable growing was taking place many years ago.
And of course, they probably don't need to spend $1,500 on it to be told what they already know.
Absolutely not. There's a real easy way of... My current home that I live in, and I have done for the last 24 years, and I haven't grown a 3rd leg yet or lost an arm.
And you've still got both ears.
I've still got both ears.
Which is good because your glasses stay.
But in all seriousness, if you've got, and this I'm being quite serious, if you've got worms in your garden, and if you've got grass grub in your lawn, which most of us always get on an annual basis, you haven't got contamination of anything that would have been used in an orchard or a vegetable production. So
that's your catalyst, worms and grass grub?
Absolutely. And they're the nasty insecticides that were used years ago were DDT and also diazinon, and they truly were seriously dangerous materials. And they were great for grass grub. So I know our neighbourhood, we all get grass grub because they come and ask me what should we do next and when should we do it. So we've been eating vegetables out of our gardens for those 24 years and certainly have not had any problems at all.
Yeah, that's fair comment. So bottom line is, it's nothing to be
There's 2 things
about.
to do. If you haven't got the opportunity if you don't take the opportunity to go to the meetings, and I think come away from them probably a little more confused, ring ECAN, explain where you live, and they will give you an idea of what's going on. The question that I had, I thought was quite a serious one, was that is this going to end up being on our limb? If we end up selling our properties, is it going to be put on our limb? ECAN said that's nothing to do with us, you've got to ring Christchurch City Council and ask them. So I did that, I rang Christchurch City Council, and they are not too sure themselves at this point. But it has to be proven that it is contaminated for them to go onto a limb. So I'd say the chance of that happening is
so
pretty
you're not
limited.
going to have to pay $1,500 to prove it's not contaminated?
I think if somebody takes it on seriously, they will insist upon registered people to come out and test it, and the cost is around $1,500, which I think is an absolute nonsense.
So we'll watch that one just to see what unfolds?
Absolutely.
Right,
yeah.
okay. Chemicals, speaking of which, cans, empty cans, nearly empty cans.
This time of the season, the growers are all heading off on holiday, and they've going to take their gumboots off and go and sit on a nice warm island somewhere, I'm sure. But what happens, and it's pretty frustrating, they're getting better, but there's a lot of empty containers around spray sheds and farmhouses and what have you. What I mean by farmhouses, I mean farm buildings. They need to be collected up. They need to be, if they're plastic, recycle them. There's recycle centres clearly marked for the farmers to take these things back to. And or if it's combustible, cardboard or paper or whatever, plastic, combust the jolly stuff in the next hot fire they have out in the farm, and get them nice and tidy. Check out the safety gear, and the best way to check out safety gear at this time of the year is throw it out and buy new stuff when it comes around to the new season, because it will be worn. It won't be as worn as they think it is, and at the end of the day there's a person going to be sitting inside that suit or wearing those goggles or whatever it may be, and they need to be up at 100%.
I love that. Your best safety check is to throw it away and get some new ones.
Absolutely, it does. And look, the growers and farmers have got a heck of a lot better about this of recent years, but there's some real rules around this, around health and safety, and if they do get caught out, they're up at the high jump, and it's not a very hard job to spend on a winter's afternoon cleaning up a spray shed and getting it all either burnt or recycled.
We've come a long way in the 20 years since you and I met at a hotel out of Hornby Way, and you were just starting to talk about it then.
That's right, that's right. Yeah, no, it has, and I mean, equipment's got better, and our knowledge has got better. And the really, really exciting thing about all this is the products that we're using now for pest and diseases are far, far less dangerous and far, far more user-friendly than they've ever been for years, and we're using less of them. We have to have a reason to apply a pesticide. And I think if Joe Blow urban people understand that, they'll go and buy the potatoes or lettuce at the supermarket with a whole lot of confidence, because they are certainly not contaminated.
In fact, would it be fair to say that the ones who are probably most at risk are the home gardeners who are buying stuff from Bunnings or wherever and not wearing the right gear and having a great old time and drifting across to the neighbours?
Absolutely. I mean, I've had a number of people over the years say to me, "Oh, you know, I went out and I actually put those prills on the lawn. Oh, I got a headache." I said, "Do you have a mask on?" "Oh, no, I didn't even have gloves on." Those simple things. The housewife puts gloves on to go and do the dishes. Why the heck don't you do that when you're out spraying your potatoes or whatever? It's quite simple, really.
And you open up potting mix and people have got Legionnaire's disease from it.
Yes, absolutely. Quite dangerous. You know, you cut it and keep it away from his face and tip it out.
And you wear gloves and you wear face masks.
Absolutely, because these things hit you before you realise that you've actually taken them into your breathing process in your body. It's not good.
How do we get across, Jim, that it's actually more masculine to wear gloves and to wear a mask than it is to go bare hands?
A good point. It's a bit like, you know, when safety belts first came in and then they became compulsory, for goodness sake. Of course, there's still a number of people don't wear them, and we hear about those tragedies all the time.
You read about them in the paper, they go through the windscreen.
Absolutely. So, I mean, that's what they're doing to themselves. They're putting themselves through the windscreen if they haven't got their gloves and masks on. And if they want to do that, that's fine. They shouldn't be around if that's the case. And it really does annoy me. And there's plenty of education out there for them to read or look in signs. I mean, it's all over the place.
Common sense, Jim.
Top 2 inches.
Indeed, Jim, thank you very much indeed. We've got more for you on Rob's Country straight after the break. Welcome back to the program. Basic health of camelids, and the first question, of course, is what is a camelid? But everybody knows.
Yeah, well, okay. So basically, it's the common camelid species we see around the place are alpacas and llamas, of course. But there are a couple of wild species from South America, the guanaco and the vicuña. But basically, as far as we're concerned, it's llamas and alpacas.
They're called camelids because they're part of the camel family?
That's right. They have a 3-chambered stomach system rather than a 4-chambered system like normal ruminants, but by and large they function the same as ruminants.
And 2 toes.
2 toes, that's right, 2 toes. And that gives us some problems as well too. But no, they're pretty much a pet industry these days, and so they've become quite common on small acreages or small blocks of land with people that want something on the land that's pretty low maintenance, doesn't take a lot to look after, and they are very easy care animals. But in saying that, there are a few things that people need to be aware of every year. And
let's start with gelding.
Gelding, quite important actually, because they're an animal that if the inhibition is lost with humans, so for instance if you've kept an entire male alpaca or llama from a very young age, and the inhibition or the slight bit of fear that's retained with human presence is lost, they can be quite dangerous, because they can sometimes keep the person that they're used to, they think they're part of their group of animals, and if a new human comes very close, they can be quite dangerous, and they'll try and protect their mate or their buddy very, very aggressively, and they can be very, very dangerous and very frightening, both kicking and spitting, and especially with male llamas, they have these very, very dagger-like sharp fighting teeth that can actually cut people quite severely. So it's very important that if they are going to be pet animals and they're not going to be used in a breeding sense, that they are gelded. And it's a relatively simple operation. Some vets actually do it standing, just with local anaesthetic. We prefer to do it under general anaesthesia, but
well, it stops the kicking, doesn't it?
It stops the kicking, that's right. And I think it just, we seem to feel we've got better control of the whole situation. But
I was being flippant, sorry.
That's all right. I mean, I'd be kicking and screaming as well.
It was take steps, yes, absolutely huge ones. You mentioned the teeth. Should
Yep.
they be trimmed or at all?
Yeah, so especially again llamas, they have these fighting teeth. They should be removed, really, or at least filed off, and that generally needs sedation to do adequately, and sometimes a bit of local anaesthetic as well, and sometimes antibiotic if we've breached into the pulp of the tooth in so doing by trimming them. They can be very dangerous, and they need to be either removed or trimmed out to make the animals safe.
It doesn't affect their eating at all?
Not at all. They're not used in eating, and they sort of come out at different angles anyway. They are just like daggers, really. They're very sharp, and they're both on the upper and lower jaws. The incisor teeth, the teeth that they use to chew or pick up the food before it's chewed, older animals, these can tend to get rather long, and they can interfere with the animal being able to close its mouth. And so sometimes in ageing animals, these need to be filed back a bit. And this is kind of the time of year to be looking at that sort of thing, because in the autumn there are some normal husbandry practices that need to be done right now, and in particular that involves getting them in and administering vitamin D to them. They seem to be very, very prone at becoming vitamin D deficient in the autumn months because of low sunlight levels, and gelded males seem to be much more prone to that, and we get a syndrome we call rickets, which is life-threatening, and it's much more prone in dark-skinned or dark-fleeced animals, of course, because no sunlight can get there. And if someone has not gone about shearing the animal for a year or so, of course, that can be influential. And actually, some part of the treatment of rickets is actually in these dark animals is actually, as well as giving them the medication that they require, actually shearing the top of the animal so at least the back line does get some sunlight.
It's a name I hadn't heard for ages. I remember people having cats with rickets.
Yeah, it's not true rickets, but it's actually a very, very deficient low blood phosphorus level. It's very, very dangerous, and it's fairly unique to these creatures, and again the dark furred ones.
Feet?
Feet, again, as animals age, just like I was talking about the incisor teeth, they have two toes, as you've mentioned, and they sort of have claws, almost like normal pet animals do. So they have a very soft pad with a claw that grows almost like a dog's claw, and that can, as they get older, need to be trimmed away because they can overgrow and curl under and cause problems. It's very, very simple, and a lot of these things, as I've said, they're very easy care animals, and simply with routine bringing them in twice a year, autumn as I've mentioned with the rickets prevention, but also in the warmer months when they're shearing, that's a perfect time to do their toenails as well. It's very easy care. And
speaking of shearing,
yep, really interesting to see, and yeah, much more different than sheep, for instance, which is what most people think of when we talk about shearing. So the animals kind of needs to be tied out onto its side, and so they tend to have a stropping system where the front legs and the back legs are sort of stropped outwards, and the animal's shorn on one side and then simply flipped over and shorn on the other, and it works very, very well. It sounds funny, but it works well, and it seems to be not very stressful for the animal. And shearers that have actually become akin to doing this procedure, they do it very, very easily, and yeah, it's simple. The fleece, it's a shame it's still just a cottage industry, because the fleece is beautiful. It's very, very fine. I don't know the technicalities on how many microns that the fleece is, but very, very fine fleece, and it's a shame it couldn't have really developed as an industry.
No, it still could do. Briefly, you mentioned vitamin D.
Yep.
What about other vitamins?
not as essential. They tend to do very well, these animals, on very poor quality pasture. Of course, they're adapted to living in the Andes and in these very low fertile regions of South America, and so they just do exceptionally well on nothing really. So vitamin D is the biggie. Parasite control, lice is a big thing, so we need to be a wee bit careful about that. And of course, most people will tend to use an injection drench that does ecto or lice parasites as well as internal parasites. And yeah, very, very simple, and yeah, but there are things that need to be done.
Okay, so if you've got them, talk to your vet and exactly.
Absolutely.
Well, I know we're waterlogged throughout the country. I was in Southland this week, and boy, are they underwater. But I still wanted to have a chat with the RX Plastic boys about the season before and approaching.
So the weather forecasters would have us believe, for sure, and so would history probably.
What should we be doing? I know it's very hard to think irrigation when you're wearing gumboots.
Well, it is, and inevitably we struggle through each irrigation season waiting for the autumn rains, and then once they hit, we forget about it until next time. But and it is difficult. It's difficult to get on the ground and actually do installations in these wet conditions, but we really do need to be thinking about it. Demand is high, I think, in all sectors of the industry, and people only have the ability to produce so much or install so much in any given time. So I think the people who think early will be the ones that, and the only ones that come out of this with the desired result.
With something like K-line, should people be walking it to make sure that it's all tickety-boo and there's no sort of holes or cracks anywhere?
Yeah, I mean, it's always good practice to kick it against a fence somewhere, and in the process of doing so, yeah, take note of any thing that might need attention. It's pretty easy to do, you know, bit by bit when you've got a bit of spare time versus all of a sudden we want this thing going. And you know, I must admit, seeing some beside the main road this year, and it took the guy about 3 weeks to get Ack and actually put nozzles in some of the sprinklers that were missing. But hey, it's all in the efforts of getting everything up and running at the beginning of the season.
People who will be wanting to buy new because they haven't bought before, how far ahead should they plan?
Well, we sort of personally anticipate demand, and we make as much as we can up until the season, but the early bird catches a worm. I mean, that'll be they will get thing. I mean, interesting, we just walked through to see if there was any nice piles to film in front of, and there's hardly a pod in the place. We're busy supplying our Northern Hemisphere customers at the moment, and then we will start building our stocks for the coming season. But you know, worst case scenario, which I think was 2008, we ended up with over a 3-week lead time on orders. We haven't been in that position since, but indications would be that demand is going to be quite high.
And obviously, you know, people do suddenly want it. They want it now.
Yeah, they tend to. That's right. Particularly if it's getting dry, that early patch that tends to get dry in September. And the beauty of K-line is it's very quick to install. So they could, under perfect conditions, come rocking in here and get a few cords of pipe and everything, and 2 days later they'll be actually putting water on, but only if you've got the stuff.
How's GSET going?
Yeah, very good, very good. We've ironed out most of the bugs and thing. I mean, it's going to be challenging. We've got a lot of people looking at the moment. It's been so wet. GSET, of course, is going to be installed on steeper country in a lot of cases, and that's a little bit hard to get onto. So getting yourself organised, getting your designs done, and taking advantages of any pockets of reasonable weather would be advisable, because it certainly takes a little bit longer to install and get up and running.
And you need an installer, don't you?
You really do. I mean, there's pipe to get in the ground, and there's There's GPSing. There's all sorts of work to be done in preparation for installing, as well as the install process. There's a few companies now geared up pretty well with contract installing teams ready to go. So bringing the orders will make it happen.
It's always better to be at the front of the queue, not at the back when the weather turns dry, though, isn't it? After the break, it's Rural Women, New Zealand. Welcome back to Rob's Country. Kerry, how's your school bus 20Ks either way project going?
On the trial. It's gone very well, actually. It's actually now completed, and we've got the results of the trial. The report's being finalised to go off to the NZTA, Transport Authority. It's gone exceptionally well, and we're absolutely thrilled with the results, because it has shown that the sign they've been using, the large big square with the 20 lighting up, is actually very effective in changing driver behaviour around school buses. So we were thrilled with that. The trial took. Well, there were several stages to the trial. We did first a poll to see, what's driver behaviour, what's their understanding of the law to start with. Do people actually know what the speed limit is? And then we tried an awareness campaign, which was all about getting the message out in the media that either way it's 20K. There was radio advertising, billboards, lots of publicity to try education alone. And the trial showed that actually didn't make a lot of difference. So, for everyone who says, you just need to educate people, you don't need to do anything special, we've actually shown through this trial that education alone is not enough. So when we put the signs on the buses, and this was with Pearson's coach lines through Mid-Canterbury, we had the signs on 30 buses, so it was a pretty good trial throughout Mid-Canterbury. And they were a large sign, and we found that as soon as those signs lit up, traffic slowed immediately. So they were very, very effective. And there was significant difference in speeds past the buses with those signs illuminated. So we're absolutely thrilled.
So you should be too. Because it makes sense, because in the city here, for example, when you're approaching a school and when the students are coming in and out, they put the signs up and everybody slows right down.
That's right. That's right. So it's great to see that, we now have a sign that has proved to work on buses to have people slow down around the buses. Yep. So now that there's a small task force just working on the technology of that sign to make sure it's going to be the most effective size and operational, how it works.
Yep.
Because as you can appreciate,
switch,
they have. They've got a switch, and the first stage is the little flashing lights, like hazard lights, come on just as the bus is pulling into the stop. But once the doors open, the 20 lights up, and traffic then has to slow. They're working on that because, as you can imagine, there's so many different sizes and shapes of buses in New Zealand. It's not like in America where they're all the one standard size. Here they can be anything from a 50-seat or 60-seater coach right down to a 4x4 Land Rover and everything in between.
Yeah,
so we've got to
exactly.
have a sign that's effective in terms of its size for visibility for the traffic, but also doesn't interfere with the driver visibility and operation of the vehicle, of the bus. So they're just sort of tweaking a little bit of the technology around it, and then it will go forward into the review of the Traffic Devices Code, which is being done early next year. So we're hoping that by the end of next year, certainly within an 18-month time frame, that will be an approved sign and can be applied to all the buses.
18 months, we've got to wait 18 months.
I know, but we only want to do this once and we want to get it right. So the key is to get the specifications for the sign right and the technology around it. And then obviously there's issues around the funding, who's going to be paying for the signs to go on the buses, and the little task force together, which Rural Women are part of, along with we're going to get the Bus and Coach Association, Ministry of Transport, NZTA, Turns, who's the Transport Engineering, Roading New Zealand, who've run the trial, and all together and sort of work on the detail around that and options for how it can be funded, right through from whether it might be a completely ministry funded thing or a bus operator funded thing, or partnerships with schools and communities to raise money. So we can work out different models for how it might happen.
I guess you could hit two ministries. You could talk to Jerry Brownlee for transport and education as well.
Yeah, well, there's the possibility. So that task was going to look at how that might eventuate and look at different models for it. So we're really excited that this is going to finally come off and we can keep our children a lot safer on the roads.
18 months doesn't going to take long.
But we've been
It's
campaigning on this for years.
here.
We've been campaigning on it for years, and
Yes.
it's just great to finally see the light at the end of the tunnel and know that we've got a sign that is really effective and
Good.
will work.
All power to your elbow.
Thank you.
Ministry of Education and starting to promote agriculture.
Yes, they've just launched a new project, sort of almost like a competition in a way, and they call it EPIC. It's for Year 10 students to come up with suggestions and ideas on how they can best deliver education around encouraging youngsters to consider agriculture as a career choice. Agriculture at the moment is really
year 10,
struggling.
That's about 5th form, wasn't it?
Fourth form.
Fourth form.
I have to work it back myself.
Sorry, I'm sort of still
No,
not as old.
that's fine. I mean, the agriculture sector is struggling to get young people to take on as a career. For all kinds of reasons, whether it's the antisocial hours or the pay rates, or whether
It's not sexy.
it's not sexy, and career paths in it are fairly limited in some sectors. And particularly now as it's getting harder and harder for youngsters to even consider owning their own farm in the future, it's starting to get a real difficult choice for them. So. They're looking at ways that, how would the youngsters like to learn about it? What do they see as being career options? How would they like to see it being taught? So the ministry's actually, I guess, consulting with youngsters about that. So really encouraging to see that they've taken a forefront on doing something about getting education to encourage youngsters to choose agriculture.
Interesting. Yesterday I was talking to a chap in Southland and sort of central, sort of around Drummond area, and I said how cosmopolitan dairying has become, and he said, there's one white child on the school bus, all the rest of them are from other nations whose parents have come to join the industry in Southland.
And that's not uncommon anywhere else in the country either. Mid Canterbury's recently finished a research project on the needs of immigrant families, and they interviewed 47 different nationalities in Mid Canterbury alone.
We're getting amazingly cosmopolitan.
We are, it's a good thing for our young children who are obviously living in a far more global world than perhaps you and I grew up in.
Totally.
With access to internet and travel, the way people travel now. So it's great for them to be able to have that opportunity to experience different cultures. So
makes geography and social studies so much more interesting.
Absolutely. So it's a good thing.
Exactly. And very briefly, Freedom Campers?
Freedom Camping. Yeah, it was great to see the Christchurch City Council just appointed an officer to look at the issue of freedom camping in their area. It's an issue in rural areas where people who perhaps in tents or non-self-contained camper vans are just rocking up to rest area or side of the road or anywhere they choose, camping for the night. The majority of them are very good, but then there's that element who will leave their rubbish behind, do their business in the shrubbery and just leave it all for everyone else to clean up. And it's pretty unsavoury. And, rural women are quite concerned about this because, this is our backyard that it's happening in. And we want to make sure that, there are bylaws there and that they are being adhered to and that people are being responsible out in the countryside.
And if they don't live by the rules, they get fined, I hope.
Absolutely. I know some councils have quite stringent fines. And it's also about councils making sure they have good facilities for camper vans to offload their waste as well.
Kerry, thank you very much indeed. After the break, I'm going to be talking to Grant Mangan about a brand new program which starts next week, and it's a humdinger. And yes, you've got every right to be wondering why I'm holding a woman's shoe, a red woman's high-heeled shoes. And it's not full of champagne, but it does have a very good, strong connection with a new program that Grant Mangan has been working on and with and all about. Grant, high heels in high country.
Well, you can't put all the responsibility onto me alone, Rob, actually.
Well, I was just unloading it on, actually.
Since this is actually a collaboration very much between the two of us. And in actual fact, I think the idea of doing a show about celebrating rural women who are achieving great things did actually come from you.
Somebody my size.
Actually, I think it did, given that you've spent the best part of the last 20 years going out meeting.
It's 20 mumble years.
20 mumble, okay, we're not actually
20 mumble years I've been doing this.
20 mumble. And in actual fact, of course, it'll be the second time in 6 months that you and I have collaborated on a program as well, because obviously we've been doing Rob's Country Showtime, which I'm sure a lot of your Rob's Country viewers will be very familiar with.
So basically the concept, which we're working on is highlighting successful rural women, and it can be making pickles at a kitchen table or running a multi-million-dollar property.
Absolutely, because I think one of the stories we really wanted to tell was that women are doing some amazing things in the rural sector, and it isn't just it's not just bored, farmers' wives who are thinking, oh well, I could turn that fruit into some pickles or jams and sell it on a stall at the end of the driveway. But it's also a lot of the women who are actually running their farms, and some of these farms, as you know, are enormous. And their financial worth and the sort of transactions that they're involved in are, well into the millions of dollars. So there's actually a lot of responsibility, and you actually have to have a lot of knowledge and expertise to actually be able to run those sorts of farms.
It's interesting that a lot of these businesses and things like the Colvin Fate and Flaxmere Art in the Garden and her open days, Penny's open days, grew out of Sir Robert Muldoon dropping their supplementary minimum price.
Well, that is a fascinating thing, isn't it? That actually you can trace a lot of those initiatives, as you say, right back to when the tap was turned off, and suddenly a lot of farms did, I suppose, go to the war. I mean, I think of quite a lot of people who actually just had to sell up and leave the land altogether. But there were quite a number of women, actually, and in a lot of instances, as you know, they were women, who said, well, no, there's got to be some way we can do something. And Penny Zeno's story in particular, you're referring to at Flaxmere, is absolutely fascinating about how that she was growing Gypsophila because they were getting more money for selling stalks of Gypsophila than they were for the sheep. And she set up an old-fashioned rose mail order business and made more money out of that than the farm was actually earning. Now, obviously, times have improved for farmers, and so those offshoots of the farming business aren't required anymore. But absolutely fascinating story, and Penny is in fact one of the guests on the show. In fact, our very first show, which goes to air next Tuesday, is
as in the 27th.
Yes, as in the 27th at 8 o'clock.
Now you're simulcasting it. Because you've been doing all the background stuff. I'm just the guy who does the interview. But I mean, it's channel 200, but it's also on CTV at exactly the same time.
Absolutely. So 3 screenings a week, but they're exactly the same times, whether you're watching on Sky or whether you're watching on Freeview. So at Tuesday at 8 o'clock, Thursday at 12:30 midday, and then at 5:30 on a Saturday. So we're doing an evening, a daytime sort of lunchtime, and doing a weekend slot.
Interesting that Westpac have seen the importance of rural women and women in farming and the farming industry, and they've come in and joined forces.
Absolutely, and it's been a great pleasure to have them as a partner because they're a very enthusiastic partner, and I think I'm right in saying that they've got a lot of women in senior positions within the bank. They've got a lot of women involved in their agribusiness side as well, and in fact in the first program we went off and we've gone off and done an interview with one of their agribusiness managers down in South Canterbury, and that's a really interesting story as well. So Westpac's turned out to be an absolutely superb partner for the program, and they're probably even more enthusiastic than we are about it in actual
Which
fact.
would be very hard to do.
Yeah, very hard to do, Rob.
But
very hard.
Hence, that's why we've got red high-heeled shoes. As we said, it's called High Heels in the High Country, and it's really accepting and acknowledging what rural women do in New Zealand in the farming scene. Now, the sort of person you were going to be meeting is Michelle, who is on today's program, but she basically is working from home and started very, very simply, and it grew from there.
Well, it is, yes. We're very lucky to have it, really. The house has been built on in stages. So initially it was a little cottage. It was built in 1939 for Mrs. McElrath, who came out from Scotland. She was a descendant of the Jane Deans' family, and she lived here during the war, and then she went back to Scotland, and then it was used for the Deans family from then on, and they built on depending on whether the families and
with the advent of each child, there was a bit more built on.
Well, there was, and then there was a time, old Bill Deans lived here for many years, and he was the one that did all the tree planting. They were great tree people, the Deanses, and so we were very, very lucky that he loved trees like he did. And there's a lovely collection of trees here.
Now you're not far from sort of Kirwee, Darfield, Springston, and yet you've got tropical fruit.
Well, yes, I think that's just because of the tree, the macrocarpentry and the acidity of the needles, and the protection from the winter, the snow and the frost, we're able to grow some really cool things. We've tried different things. I've just planted a persimmon last year, but I'm not sure how that's going to go.
And the garden is obviously very well established.
It is, yes, it is. And I think a lot of people say to me, oh gosh, how do you do all this by yourself? But I think with the trees around it, we don't get a lot of weeds, and you know, it seems to look after itself. It waits for me. I don't work on it all the time.
Well, you're either expecting a lot of visitors or you've got a bit of work on the side with all this furniture.
This is my wee hobby that I started. It's nearly 2 years now, and it's sort of morphed into this monster. It's the demand of the furniture is I just keep ordering more containers, and it's just gotten busier and busier.
So where do you market it?
Because I didn't want retail property. I didn't want to buy any more property, and Steve didn't want to really be involved. I thought, well, I have to do it from home. So I started my own website, which is very easy to do. If you do an MYOB, it's like colour by numbers. You just follow the instructions and it's easy. So I just started with that, and social media now, using Facebook and you know, and Twitter and that sort of thing. And so it doesn't take very long before you get this little following, and you know, Pinterest and things like that. It's a local lady here that works with people for the technical side of their websites and things, so she gives me a hand every now and then, but it's great, and I don't have to go anywhere.
And people just come, they send you money?
They email me, and they say, can you send me more pictures or measurements? And so I go out and I take photographs and I measure things and send it back, and I send furniture all over the country. Yeah.
And you've also got other things. You've got ducks and cushions.
Well, these sorts of this is sort of I mean, everything's just sort of happened. It wasn't really. I didn't start out to do it like this, but there's little voids and gaps in the containers when they're sent over, and so rather than having empty space in the top of the containers, I just say to the fellows at the factory, can you find me some interesting things? And so they came up with the ducks and the lovely placemats, and I get baskets, so there's no waste space. And
it's like a Pandora's box.
It is really. And I've moved into a few cushions and blankets, because when I'm doing a display, I use those as my props, and then people want to buy them. So then I decided, well, I'll have more, and that's how that's happened. Yeah, which is great fun.
What's your advice to somebody who wants to help support a farm or a property, or is bored?
Well, first, I think women are great because they know what they love. So you talk to your friends, and what would you really like? What are you finding hard to find? You know, and particularly in Christchurch in the last couple of years, people have said to me, there's not the selection. So you have a look online, and with importing now, it's very easy, and you can find things, gorgeous things, and have them sent over, and you can set up your own website and have some fun. I don't invest too much to begin with, and let it grow. It's great. It's great
So
fun.
the website is obviously the key.
I think so. It's very easy. Everybody looks. Well, most people do. They search the web before they buy anything, and you know, and so long as you get your keywords and everything right, and you know, and you've got a good product, that's the most important thing. It does it itself.
It's astounding. I mean, seriously, you're in the middle of nowhere, really.
We are. Well, it's a good 45 minutes to the airport if you've got, you know, reasonable traffic. So for me to work in town, I just didn't want to do that, and I didn't want to do nothing because, you know, it's boring, and I didn't want to work every day. So some days I want to do more, so I'll tweak my photographs or I'll fix things up on the website. And then other days it's a lovely day, so the girls up the road might want to go and play golf, or we'll have a game of tennis or something, and we don't do anything. I don't do anything. And there's a couple of other girls that are doing similar things. There's another lady that's doing art. She's got her own art, and she's doing it on the website. And there's another lady that's doing her own pickles and jams and things, and she's doing it that way as well. So it's a good pocket money, and it's and you meet some lovely people.
It is making money. Well, I'm not going
Absolutely.
to be... I don't want to be too rude. But
Yes, it is. Yeah, it is. It is. In fact, it's got to the point now where it's quite busy, and Steve's helping me now because I can't. Logistically, I should have chosen something like jewellery, because to move furniture around on my own with a big trailer and a truck and things like that, it's okay if I've got lots of time, but if I'm in a hurry, it's a big job. Yeah, and so it's worth it for him to help me.
A lovely setting, as you must admit, and nice little business, and it's obviously just take small steps and you'll get to the end in the right shape. After the break, it's Federated Farmers with Linda Murchison. Welcome back to Rob's Country. There was a time when everybody seemed to have an uncle who owned a farm, and everybody had a bit of an understanding about what went on in the city and what went on in the country, but not anymore, Linda, it seems.
No, it seems not, Rob, and it's one of those things you hear a little bit about in the media sometimes. Sometimes it's played up a wee bit, but in some fields it is a growing concern. I think it's well, as you know, I'm busy researching a PhD, and it was one of the driving factors for me doing that was having spent 20 years in the environmental management game and being constantly surprised, I guess, over the years at the difference in the perceptions among some of my colleagues, both in central and local government, about what farmers do and what drives them, and actually knowing from my own background what really drives most farmers.
Because you've got a foot in each camp, of course.
Absolutely, and seeing that difference, and it is important in some areas, particularly in environmental management and things, because if you think about it, it's not rocket science. If you think a farmer's doing X, Y, Z, and you make policy around X, Y, Z when they're actually doing A, B, C, it's not going to work, and you're not going to get the outcomes that you're after.
How much fault can be laid at the feet of the national media, who will only ever show the negatives, who will say the milk prices dropped 4 cents, that's going to mean $17 million will not go into farmers' pockets?
I think bad news always travels faster than good news. But to be fair, I think although sometimes it's in the media, the media is usually the space for the good news stories too. I mean, when you hear about the Farm and Balance environmental awards and Kiwi2 Trust covenants and things like that, that's usually through the media. What concerns me more probably is, as you were saying in the intro about everyone having an uncle, you go into places like regional councils and even into MFE and central government these days, and you talk to the people who are doing the planning work in bits and pieces, chances are they've never been on a farm. For a lot of people in regional councils, the only contact they have with farmers is with the 0.05% of farmers that they're prosecuting because they've let their effluent go into a stream or done something else, and that's their only exposure to farmers and farming, and often not realising, probably because we're not vocal enough, that the other 99% of farmers are standing right behind them doing the teapot stand as well and going, you shouldn't be doing that. So,
you've got your farm open days, which are working, but it must be a tiny little percentage of the people you really want to get out there.
I think so. Most of the people that go to farm open days are people who are either interested in farming or have a bit of a connection anyway, and are not probably the decision makers. I mean, if we look back at farming history in New Zealand over the last 160 years, we've had a whole lot of challenges. Each time we do something new, every action gets a reaction. Yep. And we've been very, very good actually about responding really, really quickly. But for the first 100 years or so of that, maybe even 30 years of that, those decision makers who were doing the responding were farmers. Most politicians, most councillors, they were farmers, and they were the ones who were driving the legislation through, setting up the catchment boards, setting up the rabbit boards, setting up the Department of Agriculture. Whereas now, a lot of the decision makers in the era we're in now are not farmers, and the challenge for us is that we've still got to do what we did all the way through, but now we just have to convince somebody else who's the decision maker that this is a good idea and this is the way it needs to be done.
I mean, the Minister of Agriculture used to be number 3 in the pecking order in the government.
Yes.
Literally.
Yes, yes.
So there'll be the Prime Minister, the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Agriculture.
Yes, we've slipped down a wee bit. And it's quite interesting because I was having a conversation with someone about this the other day, about the disconnect between what drives the economy and people understanding what drives the economy. And apparently the person I was discussing with this said, oh, it's not only just farming. He was having a discussion with some businessman in Christchurch who was saying the exact same thing about manufacturing. And I don't know whether that's because so many people are removed from direct involvement in production now that you don't sort of realise that when you're sitting in your office in Auckland or Wellington or Christchurch, that the reason you're sitting there providing that service or meeting that demand is because of what's driving it underneath in terms of primary industry and manufacturing.
We're a lot busier now, though. I mean, we're flat out with our little faces into computers, and we're looking all around the world for news, and we don't have that same empathy for everybody else around us, I don't think.
Quite possibly, but the challenge for us, of course, as farmers, is we've got to get our good news stories out there. I was just reading something the other day about greenhouse gas emissions, and of course livestock emissions get a hammering around that. Actually, in New Zealand over the last 7 years, we've been reducing our carbon footprint per unit of production by 1.3% a year in the agricultural sector. And we're not part of the ETS, but we're doing it anyway. But that news isn't out there. It's not getting out there.
So we've got to get it out. Interesting story. I was talking to a dairy farmer who put 100 hectares of trees in on his property to help balance it. Federated Farmers phone number and others on your screen now. I'm Rob Cope-Williams. You've either been watching or you've just missed Rob's Country, but we'll be back at the same time next week. Until then, bye now.